there's ever a topic that we could probably all identify with, I think it would be today's conversation, today's topic. But before I unveil the subject matter, so to speak, let me invite you into my headspace this past week. And for some of you, maybe you're going to yawn. You're like, yeah, I've been there, done that. But that, you, like, young parent you, I get it. But 1 week ago today, I took my oldest child and dropped her off at college. And so she's been there for a week. And it's been rough. Like, yeah, you can look at the pictures there. That's the kids in mourning. And this is a total jerk move by a wife. You're just trying to give your kid a last hug, and she's like, this is a photo moment. No, it is not. And that is Dryden with her new roommate. And so we went there, and the ride there was this terrible, right? Like, exciting, and I'm so glad that this door is open and she has this opportunity in front of her. It's really exciting, but at the same time, I just miss her. Like, she's a pretty awesome kid, and so the whole drive there, I'm thinking about all of the things that have happened throughout our lives, and the first day of schools and kindergartens, and the vacations, and the trips that we've gone on, the field trips, all that kind of stuff, and I'm just a mess the whole time, and we get there, and then it's all about setting up the room, and it's about meeting her roommates and seeing her volleyball coaches and all that kind of stuff, and then there's the goodbye, which is dreadful. By the way, thank you in Christ Jesus that our goodbyes don't last forever, right? So it's been a rough week. I've been a little bit hazy because I just miss her, and I know that she's down there doing her thing, and that's my headspace, her headspace, just to share a little bit about that. So it's been a rough first week for her because all week long, Emily and I have received text messages, and we've had phone calls from her, and because she is now a college athlete, and she's learning in week one that's a whole nother level of training and conditioning, and the grind is not club volleyball, and the grind is not like high school volleyball. It's a whole next level of what she would probably at this point call torture, right? And the coaches had warned her. She received a text message a couple months ago saying, hey, make sure you're doing your workouts because you're going to get there. And day one, it's going to be 3 hours in the morning, 2 hours break, 3 hours in the afternoon. That's going to be your practice schedule. That's 6 hours. And so come in shape. And so she was fully planning on that. She had a gym membership. I coach volleyball so I can get her in the gym, did all kinds of work. And about a month and a half ago, she started having a problem with her lower back. And every time that she would make this move to hyperextend, there was a pain there. And she started to get nervous about that. So she ignored it for a while and didn't tell me, and then finally did. And then I said, okay, just take it easy for a couple weeks, and hopefully the pain will go away. It didn't go away. So we set an appointment with the orthopedic specialist, and they did an x-ray and MRI, and thankfully it was negative. And they said it was just some kind of a muscle pain. We talked to the spine specialist at Blue Ridge, who are phenomenal people over there, by the way. And they said she needs to rest. And Dryden's like, I can't rest. Like Coach said, be ready, because if you don't, you're going to be miserable. But she didn't jump for a month. No hitting for a month. She did some basic passing work, all that kind of stuff. And so, while all these other girls showed up on campus, all these other volleyball players ready to go, having done their workouts, she had to take her foot off the gas pedal instead of put her foot on the gas pedal. And so, after the first day of training, she was sore, blisters on her feet. Day 2, she could barely walk. Day 3, she wanted to quit and go home, and she loves the sport, and she knows she's going to push through this intense time, but in those conversations, something popped up as she was talking to me on the phone. Papa, I don't know if I can do it. And she knows ultimately that she can, but doubt started to creep in, right? That's what trials and tribulations and tough times and frustrations can do. We've all been there. We've all had doubts, right? Maybe we were convinced what we were doing at the time was the exact right thing to do, the right school to attend, the right job to take, the right person to marry, the right place to move, right? We were sure on it. And then what happens? Difficulties or challenges, or heartaches, or unexpected turns of events, and all of a sudden, what happens? We second guess, we start to wonder, and we start to doubt. It creeps in. Gustave Flaubert in the Memoirs of a Madman said this: doubt is an illness, I love that comes from knowledge And sometimes it's just a fraction of a truth. Sometimes it's just a small morsel of truth that we bite onto, not the whole picture, and then leads to madness. That's an interesting thought. Will you bow your heads and pray with me? Father, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I have a question for you this morning. A simple one. What's your favorite miracle that Jesus performed? I mean, we've talked incessantly in this series, right, A Journey with Jesus, about all the wonderful, all the cool, epic things Jesus said and did, and we've gleaned so much from how these 12 disciples got to see it all, how they reacted and responded, trying to make sense of everything that came along with the Jesus experience. And you've heard a lot from Scott and from me, from Stephen last week, from Chris at the start of the summer. So what about you? Do you have a favorite miracle that Jesus performed? If you did, this is like audience participation time, all right? So just if you do, just put your hand up in the air, and I'll point at you, and you shout where you are, that miracle. One of the miracles that just, there's something about it that just captivates you. Anybody? Go ahead. Feeding the 5,000. Oh, man, yeah, like that's an incredible story. Anybody else? Go ahead, yell it out. You're way back there. Raising Lazarus. That, yeah, jaw-dropping, mind-blowing stuff. Anybody else? Oh, somebody's pointing. Where? Okay, the back. You're right here. Rising from the dead. Yeah, it's amazing. Go ahead. How old are you? Okay. No, and yeah, that was his first miracle. That's amazing. You just made me chuckle. I love it. Taking over the sermon. Yeah, you can have my job. So many great miracles to choose from. Do you know what, in my opinion, they all have in common? Like the disciples. When you think about it, for each and every, if you want to call it Jesus' magic show, right? But for every jaw-dropping miracle, they were there. They saw them. They were in the moment. They saw paralyzed peeps now walking. People who were declared Lazarus clinically dead, now up and high-fiving and bear-hugging their friends. Nature bowing itself down to Jesus. He healed people and walked on water and fed 15. It says the feeding of 15,000 people with a few Chick-fil-A nuggets and French fries. And by the way, we know it wasn't like Five Guys fries. Because then it wouldn't be a miracle, right? You know what I'm talking about, because life has gotten so expensive recently. I can't take my whole family to a fast food joint anymore, because if I go to Chick-fil-A with all of our kids, we drive out like it's $100. There is one exception. If they're craving something like from a restaurant, I'll be like, okay, let's go get fries from Five Guys. Because I can go in there and order one French fry, one large fry, and they put it in the bag, and then they just start dumping fry after fry after fry in the bag, and I can feed all of my kids with one large order of French fries. But think about it, every last miracle for 3 years, side by side with Jesus. And John 21:25 says what? That if all of the things that Jesus did were recorded and written in books, there wouldn't be libraries in the world big enough to contain all of his actions. And they saw it. They saw the miracles. And not only did they see the miracles, they also knew the plan. On multiple occasions, Jesus told them plain and simply, hey guys, very soon I'm going to die. He told them. It wasn't a hidden message or a one-time pronouncement that if they forgot about it, somehow they'd fail this Jesus pop quiz and get an F. No. Again and again, he told them, my end is coming, that my time is near, I'm going to die. And not just tell them that, he gave them specifics. This is how it's going to happen. This is who's going to do it. And oh, by the way, this is what you're going to do when all of this goes down. And here's how the story will end. 3 days. He wasn't vague or nondescript. He held nothing back. So they knew who Jesus was. and they knew what he could do. They saw with their own eyes, and they knew the plan. Betrayal, humiliation, assassination, then resurrection. Which sounds great, right? The resurrection of Jesus, but you have to think about it from their perspective. A little bit hard to believe. Except for the fact that they were there for Lazarus. For the whole moment, like, come out, and he shreds the burial clothes. They were there for Jairus' daughter. Some of the disciples in that room when Jesus walked in, and this girl that had been dead, he brought her back to life. And in Luke 7, when he's walking down the street and there's a funeral procession going by, a widow's son had passed away. And Jesus, you know what he does? He ruins the funeral. That's what he did. They saw over and over again, Jesus can do it all. He's got power over food and sickness and demons and weather, and most impressive of all, power over death. They knew what he could do, and they knew the plan. Die, and 3 days later, ruin another funeral. That's why the story in John 20 is a little bit perplexing to me. If you have your Bibles, John 20, we're going to start reading at verse 24. Now Thomas, also called Didymus, one of the 12, wasn't with the disciples when Jesus came, so the other disciples told him, dude, like, I'm telling you, man, we've seen Jesus. But he said to them, listen, real cool, nice prank, unless I see the nails in his hands and put my finger where they were, unless I see his side and can put my hand in there, I'm not going to believe that. So Jesus has been doing this big reveal tour, right? And to a number of people, the two Marys, to like some disciples walking along the road, to some disciples, a group of them in a room. It's the most epic, I told you so, tour in history. And in every instance when Jesus reveals his identity to people, and here I am, right? Everyone's caught off guard. Everyone. They're all shocked. They're all surprised. There's no, I knew it. I just knew it. I told you he was going to do it. You were wrong. I was right. There's none of that. Everyone's caught off guard by the risen Jesus who told them that there would be a risen Jesus. They're all shocked, all surprised, all speechless by the presence of now this once dead but somehow alive Jesus. But in every big reveal to this point, and what he was busy doing, we don't know for sure, but Thomas wasn't there. He was absent. And so the other 10, they told him, like, I swear on my mother's grave, like, I'm telling you, trust me on this, Tom, Jesus is alive. Mary told him, and we bear hugged the man, and still Thomas is like, I don't know, man. This seems pretty far-fetched to me. I know you miss him, I miss him too, but back to life? Really? I mean, he doubted them. He doubted the promise. He doubted the power of Jesus. I mean, Thomas was clear, right? He didn't leave any wiggle room. He said, for me to believe what you're saying, that a dead person, I've seen him raise that you're dead. How can you do anything to raise you? No, that a dead person can raise himself back to life. Do you realize how ludicrous that sounds? Here's what I'll need to see, he said, to believe it. I'll have to see the wounds, and not just see them. I'll have to feel them, and not just feel them, put my hands inside of them. Anything short of that? And you guys can all just catch the ferry ride home, because that's what this all sounds like. One great big giant fairy tale. Verse 26, though, this is great. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and this time, right, Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked. Do you know why the doors were locked? Like, they're scared for their lives here. Like, they were disciples of Jesus. Jesus was their rabbi. The Jews had just orchestrated the assassination of Jesus. They were associated with Jesus. They had been sent out on mission trips by Jesus. They were terrified that the same people that put Jesus to death were going to come after them. And so the doors are locked. And then Jesus just came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Like, cool little miracle there. Right? Like, just pops up in the room. Boom! And then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands? Bruh, check it out. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. So, Jesus teleports into the room, and this time they're all there. Thomas is with them, and Thomas sees Jesus, and Jesus sees Thomas, and they lock eyes, they're eyeball to eyeball, and Thomas is speechless at this point. He's just like staring. Like, how can this be? I saw you hanging. I saw you bleeding from head to toe. We peeled your body off the cross. And since he's at a loss for words, Jesus starts the conversation for him. Thomas, pal, come here. You need to see these to believe? Here you go. You want to see this too? Here you go. You want to feel the scars? Have at it, buddy. And I don't know if the other 10 ratted Thomas out to Jesus. We tried to tell him that you're alive. He just wouldn't believe us, and he said he'd have to see it and touch and do all that kind of stuff, or if Jesus, like he always did, just seemed to know. But before Thomas could request the CSI investigation on Jesus, he said that he was going to do. Jesus beats him to the punch. Now, the text never says whether Thomas actually did it, actually touched the site of the wound. But whatever the case, at the sight of Jesus, at the sound of his voice, having seen the wounds, Thomas blurts out, "My Lord and my God." In other words, it's you. It's really you. But how? I saw you. You were dead. And here you are alive in color, doubt-shaming me in front of the other disciples. That's not cool. But you're alive. And I don't know if Thomas fell down onto his knees and bowed, or if he bear hugged Jesus or just burst out into tears. But that moment was life-changing for that dude. And Jesus, right on cue, because he never misses a moment to teach a lesson. Parents, that's such a great skill of Jesus that maybe we need to adopt. And it drives my kids crazy that we always are trying to teach lessons. So I think it was 2 nights ago, we were at the table. The kids were finishing up their food. A couple of them had finished already. And it was Mac, Lily, Thad, Salsa, Luna, and they're doing their thing. And I don't remember exactly what Lily asked. It was something. She said something to the degree of, "Do you want to know something dumb?" And Matt goes, "Your mom." I'm like, "Mac, do you understand how your mom jokes work?" "Mac, who is Lily's mom?" "Your mom, Mac." Right? So I had to explain to her. So when you said that to Lily, what you were doing was you used your mom joke on yourself. That's kind of how this works, right? But she heard that expression at school, and so it was a great opportunity for me to say, you don't just repeat everything that you hear, right? There's life lessons at every turn for parents, and Jesus was that way. Every time something would happen, here's something we can learn, and Jesus doesn't miss a beat, and he says this, "Because you have seen me, you have believed." Congratulations, you see, look here, and you believe. Thumbs up for that. However, blessed are people who have not seen me, and yet somehow they believe. You should love this verse. You should memorize this verse. If you're into tattooing your body with Bible verses, this is the one to go with. Because what does Jesus do in this verse, anybody? He brags about you. He compliments you. He's like, "Atta girl, Jean, you believe me. Tom, you've never seen me and heard my voice in person, but yet here you are serving every week. Aaron, you didn't heal a blind man or walk on water or see somebody do that or silence a storm, yet you serve and you serve and you serve, yet you believe. Every single one of you in here that believe in Christ Jesus, it's Jesus going, that's my boy, that's my girl." And I want to highlight this for a reason. Because we spend a lot of time, in my opinion, beating ourselves up, don't we? Because maybe we're not performing up to the spiritual level we expect of ourselves that we should be. Maybe we don't pray enough or read the Bible enough, or we don't do a great job of avoiding sin. And so for many of us, if we're honest, like we just kind of feel horrible about ourselves spiritually, and we just kind of exist in that whole world constantly. My sister for years, my older sister Francine, in her young adult years, in college, in the next few years, she just always struggled with this, to the point of tears where she never felt good enough for God to love her. Because I have this struggle over here, and I have this thought over here, and I didn't do a great job over here, and he's just always tormentors of how could God love me? And listen, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be more committed to reading and studying the Bible. We should. And I'm not saying that praying and spending more time in communion with God is not a great goal. It is. And I'm not saying that sin is not a big deal. It is. And we do, as Paul says, like, avoid this sin over here, or resist the devil, and he'll flee from you, or flee from this kind of sin over here. But at the same time, Jesus is going, oh my goodness, she believes. She believes like she's never seen me or heard my voice or any of those things, or seen a dead person come back to life, but yet here she is, and she's faithful, and I'm so proud of her. You see, believing is no small thing. Believing is the biggest thing of all. And some of you in this room need to hear Jesus go, I'm so proud of you because you believe in me. But let's talk for a minute about Thomas and Jesus. Because the author saw fit to record it, and Jesus saw fit to, kind of call him out on it. Thomas doubted Jesus. He did. In spite of the miracles that we described earlier, in spite of knowing the plan that we talked about earlier, in spite of the other 10 swearing again and again, we saw him, we saw him, we saw him, we all did. Jesus is alive. In spite of all of that, Thomas doubts. It's not until he sees that he believes, and that's, we know from Hebrews 11:1, right? That's kind of the opposite of faith. Hebrews 11:1 says faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you do not see. In other words, faith means not I see, therefore I believe. It's I believe and then I see. And Thomas doubts Jesus. And when he does, this is cool. This is kind of where we're going with this. What does Jesus do? He deals, right, with the doubt. He doesn't act like it's below him, or like it doesn't matter to him, or I've got better things to do in my time than talk to you about these things. No, it does matter. His doubts mattered to Jesus. And notice the text. He didn't wait for Tommy Boy to bring up his doubts. Jesus initiates. I heard you have doubts about me. Here, look at this. I hear you have doubts about me. Here, I want you to see this because I want you to know. His doubts mattered to Jesus. And let me tell you something, folks. So do yours. Your doubts, not too big for Jesus. And if he gave time to Thomas when he struggled with those doubts, Thomas who saw all the miracles, Thomas who knew the plan, Thomas who heard the voice of Jesus, Thomas who lived with him for 3 years, and he had doubts. If he gave the time to Thomas, and he could handle his, he could handle yours. Your doubts matter to Jesus, and he's not surprised by them, and he's not caught off guard by them, and he's not threatened by them or annoyed by them. He will deal with them. And so when you have doubts, whether it's like doubting that God will come through in the clutch, or whether it's doubting that God knows best and you can trust him with, name that horrible situation that you're going through, or whether it's God, come on, like, rise from the dead? Really? You expect me to believe that's kind of far-fetched? Whatever the doubts. Don't ignore them. Don't minimize them. Don't pretend they're not there when they are. Wrestle with them. Face them, acknowledge them, walk through them. That's what Thomas did. He said it to his disciples. Hey, here's my doubt. Not until. Express them. And parents, when your kids have doubts, don't fear that. Don't get defensive about it. Don't just start throwing things their way. Ask them questions and listen to them and dive into them. Jesus can handle their doubts. Take them to Jesus, because doubt can creep in to all of us from time to time. And Thomas, in my opinion, gets a bad rap here, okay? For 2 reasons, and the first is this. He wasn't the only one with doubts. Mark 16:14 makes it clear. Go read it. It says they all doubted, and Jesus had to confront them all that none of them believed that he would come through in the clutch, that he would do what he said he did, but because the details of this story in John 20 are told, we latch onto them. And then Thomas gets the bad rep, right? Think about this. Forever, in history, he is known as Doubting Thomas. Forever, like that's his legacy. And it's so ingrained in us and ingrained in everyone that's read the Bible for hundreds and thousands of years that it's become a common expression that even people who have never picked up a Bible and never been to church and don't know who God is will say, hey, don't be a Doubting Thomas. And they don't even know why they're saying it. It's become that common. Could you imagine if the only thing you were known for by people was your worst moment ever? Like, how awful would that be? Like, let's say you cheated on a test in 8th grade, right? Maybe, or you got caught lying to your boss, or you said something nasty behind the back of one of your friends. One time, got caught, and for the rest of your life, every time someone addressed you, it was, hey, cheating Jerry. Hey, lying Leo. Hey, gossiping Gary. Could you imagine if every time your name was addressed, it was prefaced by the thing that you struggled with, the sin that you did one time, this one event that became something that you knew about yourself and were capable of, and it was thrown in your face every single time. Like, when I was in high school, I went on a mission trip at a youth conference in Nova Scotia. And my friend Brenton had a car, a Volkswagen Jetta, and so we went in his car, and how it worked was this, because they lived a few hours away in Nova Scotia, and the local church would put this conference on, and our youth group went, and they would put us up in homes, host homes, and they would assign us to these homes. They were called billets, and so you would show up, like Friday afternoon at the billet's house, and then you would sleep there, eat there. They would feed you. You'd go to the conference all day, come back there at night, and that's kind of how it works. So Brendan and I got put at the same house, and so we pull up, we walk inside, and when we walk into the house, inside of the kitchen, I believe there were angels singing in the backgrounds as light shone over this beautiful young lady named Jamie Van Cleef. And we looked at her and we were like, that second, we both knew we were in love. And so we looked at her and then we looked at each other. We looked at her and we looked at each other. And we were like, it is on. These next 3 days, we're going to be a competition to see who could win over the heart of this damsel in distress that she only became after she met us, probably. Right? And so we both laid on thick, and we did our cheesy little high school, flirting, whatever it was, and it worked, and I won. And so super excited about that, and it was Saturday afternoon. I'm like, hey, let's, and I wanted to take her out to dinner, and there was some downtime. They gave us about 2 to 3 hours where we could go back to our billet's house, refuel, eat, come back for the rest of the conference, and Brenton had driven to the store to get something and came back with his car. And so I said, hey, Brenton, can I borrow your car? And he said, borrow my car? Why? I said, just let me. You're not using it, right? He said, no. I said, can I borrow my car? Why? I want to take Jamie out to eat. And he said, no. You're not borrowing my car. And I said, come on, dude, I've borrowed your car 100 times. Let me take the car. I'll be right back. He's like, no, you're not getting in my car. And I said, dude, you're just sour because what you didn't work, and she fell in love with me. Please, dude, you're my best friend. Can I borrow your car? And he turned at me, and he said, never will you borrow my car. And so I said to him, yeah, well, she chose me because you're fat and ugly. No joke. I was so mad that he wouldn't let me do it, and I blurted that out. You know what that makes me? A jerk, right? Total jerk thing to say, total awful thing. You never do that. And the second those words go out of my mouth, I'm like you can see him, and and I saw the look in his eyes and the dejection when he walked away, and I knew that I crossed the line. I regretted it so much. Could you imagine if from that moment on, for the rest of my life. Every time someone saw me, oh, there's Jacques the jerk. That's kind of the rep that Thomas gets. I don't want you to think about it. They didn't do it to the other disciples. Peter denied Jesus. We don't call him denying Peter. James and John have this moment like, hey, we want the thrones beside you, Jesus, right? We don't call him arrogant James and prideful John. But doubting Thomas? And the second reason I think Thomas gets a bad rap is this. Read John 11. Lazarus is dead. Bethany is where he lived. It was 2 miles outside of the capital city, Jerusalem, right? And so Jesus hears that Lazarus is dead, and he has this conversation with his disciples, and he's like, I think we need to go. But they know it's 2 miles from the capital. Jesus, there's an assassination plan. Like, they're trying to kill you, man. We can't go to Jerusalem, and we're not going to go. We don't think it's a good idea. Jesus is like, but I really, really want to go. It was Thomas. Not Peter, not James, not John, Thomas. John 11:16 says, let's go with you so that we can die as well. No doubts there. That's bold. That's brave. No one else said it. Thomas did. That's fine, Jesus. If you're going to go there, I'm going with you side by side. If they take you out, they're going to take me out too. Doubting Thomas? How about this? How about loyal Thomas? Doubting Thomas? How about brave Thomas? Courageous Thomas, and there's a lesson in here for you and for I. Jesus erased Thomas' doubts. We read the story. And even commanded him after that, do not doubt, believe. But he didn't define him by his doubts. We did that. And I don't know what sin it is, what poor choice you've made, what regrettable moment you've had, what struggle that's there that plagues you. What thing that happened that you wished you had never done and it would just go away? Let me tell you this. It does not define you. No matter what it is. You're not lying, Lucy, or angry, Adam, or infidel, Michelle. You're nothing. You are saved and secure and a significant child of God. That is who you are. You are not the sin that you did in the past. The struggle that you have today, you are a child of God. You've heard this expression before. The next time the devil reminds you of your past, you remind him of his future. There's a lot of truth in that. Katrina was the admissions director at Kentucky Christian University, and so I had made the decision to go there, and so I called up the school, and because they had to figure out how to get me here legally and do all the paperwork and get the coursework. Because when I showed up on campus, I didn't do a pre-campus college visit like kids do. No. But like I spent a whole summer on the phone with this lady trying to figure out the insurance, trying to figure out like plane tickets, trying to figure out classes, trying to figure out books, trying to figure out legal things, all that kind of stuff. And the first time I called, she was the one who answered, and she was so welcoming and so friendly and so patient with me. I was like, man, this lady's unbelievable. And she is probably the only reason why I was able to get here, because when I called her up, I knew nothing about how to get myself there. And so she was the one when we landed in Huntington, West Virginia, 20 miles from campus, that met me at the airport and bear hugged me. And we're so glad you were able to get here. And you're going to love this school. And just seeing her smile and seeing the joy in her face and seeing just the way she moved and the grace that she had. I just remember thinking, this is one of the coolest Jesus followers I've ever met in my life. I want to be like her when I grow up. That's why I was so caught off guard when she was invited a few months later on a Thursday morning to share her story in a chapel service. And she started to talk about how her upbringing wasn't easy, because she had a dad that beat her mom and then left, and her mom raised her, but because they didn't have a lot of money, she had to work 2 jobs, and so mom was just never home. And so Katrina had a lot of free time, and she fell into a friend group that was not good for her, and that friend group led her into drugs, and it started with marijuana, and it ended with crack, but they didn't have a lot of money, so she could not resource her own drug addiction, and so it led from her taking drugs to selling her body for drugs. And she said, I went through a period of 4 or 5 years where I could not tell you how many people I slept with, what their faces looked like, or what their names were, just to feed my drug habit. It got so bad. She had OD'd in an alleyway behind a dumpster in the city, and there happened to be a group doing inner city mission work. that had happened to be walking that way and saw the body and picked her up and took her to the hospital where they saved her life. And then she began to get to know this group, and this group shared with this young lady, Katrina, the hope of Jesus and what he could do and how he could put her on a new path and give her a new life. And it doesn't matter what happened in the past. God has something beautiful for you. And this lady, Katrina, surrendered her life to Jesus Christ. I'm sitting there in the chapel service just listening to this story going like, oh my goodness, I'm in tears, right? And then she shared the rest of the story about how the enemy ever since has tried to remind her of the past. As a matter of fact, one of the men that was on the mission trip fell in love with her, and she began to fall in love with him, and they began to date, and she accepted Christ Jesus, and then the church that she went to, children's director walked up to her one day and was like, hey, will you work in our kids' ministry? And she was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And the youth pastor said, hey, would you like to work with us? You'd be great with our students. You are so energetic and kind and soft-spoken, and our students would love to have you. She said, no, I'm not going to do that. She was asked to be a part of a mission trip, the very kind of mission trip that saved her life. She was like, nope, not going to do it. And when her soon-to-be husband got on one knee and said, will you marry me? She burst into tears, walked out and said, no, I can't. And when he finally talked to her and said, well, why? She said, you don't want to be with me. You don't know where I've been. You don't know what I've done. I don't even know the things that I've done. And that's when he looked at her and said, it doesn't matter what you've done in the past. That is not who you are. You are not corrupt, Katrina. You are a beautiful, saved, and significant child of God, and I love you. And you count, and you matter. That is who you are. When Thomas had his moment of doubt, what did Jesus say to him at the very end of the story? Stop doubting and believe. In other words, you're not Thomas the doubter. That's not the Thomas I know. You're not Thomas the doubter. Believe. You are Thomas the believer. In other words, he didn't call him out. He called him up. He called him into himself. You are Thomas the believer. I don't know what struggle it is that plagues you, that when you look in the mirror, you say, I am this person, that. I don't know what sin it is that creeps into your life from time to time, and you say, you know what, that's, I guess, who I am. I've always been that. You are not. You're a beautiful, significant child of God. That is who you are. And maybe you're not at the place where you've ever surrendered your life to Jesus. And you're just kind of hanging out in the mess of your own sin, and that is who you are. And that does define you. Today could be the day that no longer is attached to your name if you just say yes to Jesus. Will you bow your heads and pray with me? Father in heaven, there is none like you. You're the one who takes our past and puts it in the shredder and crumples it up and casts it as far as the east is from the west. Our sin, gone. Our new identity, sealed in you. And Father, when the enemy comes in and he starts to make us doubt that, and he starts to make us wonder, and he starts, Father, to mess with our minds, Father, I pray for everyone in here, Colossians 3:1, set our heart on things above, not on earthly things. Set our heart and our minds on things above, of Christ to see at the right hand of God. We belong to you. We are children of a king, princess and princesses that belong to you. And so today, Father, we walk out of here captured by what you did for us. Fulfilled fully and ready to do your work because we belong to you. And we love you.